The iPad lineup has become more and more confusing for the average consumer, with iPads like the iPad 9th Gen still being sold, the introduction of the new iPad 10th Gen, and the iPad Air with M1, as well as the M2 iPad Pros. Though there's one iPad that still stands out to me, and despite being only a few months shy of being 2 years old, to this day, it's still my favorite iPad in the lineup. The iPad Mini 6. The iPad Mini in general had always been one of my go-tos when it came to finding a device that was suitable for media consumption and portability. It offered a display that was considerably larger than a smartphone at 8.3 inches, which is still larger than devices like the Fold 4, which try to be both a smartphone and a mini tablet. And for me, it's been perfect for watching YouTube late in bed, making notes to add to my scripts, and even gaming, since the device is larger than a phone, but smaller than the typical iPad or tablet. It's very comfortable to play and immerse yourself in games like Call of Duty Mobile. But before we dive any deeper, a like and a sub to the channel is always appreciated. Thank you all so much for watching these videos and supporting what I do. It genuinely does mean the absolute world to me. And yeah, I'm just super happy that you guys actually care. So thank you. Anyways, the iPad Mini 6 came out in September of 2021, and when it was announced, I pre-ordered it immediately. The biggest changes to the iPad Mini 6 from the previous iPad Mini was Apple dropped the design with the home button that's more akin to the iPad 9th Gen, adding Apple Pencil Gen 2 support and USB-C. This was enough to modernize the iPad Mini and make it more desirable for someone who is looking for a device that's capable of nearly everything the rest of the iPad lineup can do, just in a smaller form factor. And nailed it, they did. Despite the iPad Mini being 2 years old, it's still using the same SoC that's inside of the iPhone 14 and 14 Plus, the A15 Bionic. It's fast, it's snappy, and using this device, even to this day, there's no sign of slowdown or any limitations compared to any iPads, beside the fact that you cannot use Stage Manager or Final Cut. Though I doubt that people will be using this as a desktop replacement, although it would have been nice considering it is capable of display mirroring. Regardless, I want to get to the pros and cons of this device and talk about whether it's something that you should consider all this time later. At 5.3 inches wide and 7.7 inches tall, the iPad Mini 6 is a very easy device to carry around, whether you're throwing it in a backpack or even a pocket if your pants are large enough. You can always have this by your side with easy access when you need it. My 12.9-inch M2 iPad Pro is amazing, but it's not something that I've used very much unless I was around the house, because it's much larger in size, especially when carrying around the Magic Keyboard, which in my opinion is a must to make the 12.9-inch iPad easy to use when out and about. The Mini only weighs in at 0.6 pounds as opposed to over 3 pounds when you factor in the 12.9-inch M2 iPad with the Magic Keyboard, which is just absurd considering both can do relatively the same thing, minus, like I said, Final Cut Pro, Stage Manager, and the fact that it does have less screen real estate, of course. This alone, though, makes me actually pick up the iPad Mini 6 and use it without thinking about it. The Mini also features a laminated display, which just means that the display is flush with the glass that sits on top of it, instead of leaving an air gap between the panel and the digitizer. Apple's latest 10th Gen iPad still doesn't have a laminated display, and whilst most people won't notice, it's something that I actually appreciate, especially when it comes to note-taking, as it really does feel like I'm writing on the iPad's display. Speaking of the 10th Gen though, while we're on that topic, despite using a similar chassis, which is more like the rest of the iPad lineup, it doesn't have Apple Pencil Gen 2 support. You need to purchase an adapter for $10 and plug it in via a USB-C to C cable to charge. You really just can't make this stuff up. Sometimes Apple can be really mind-blowing when it comes to what they do, or just absolutely insane. That's unlike the Mini though. Despite its small footprint, it still has a spot on the side for the device to not only hold, but charge and sync the Pencil Gen 2, keeping it always around for when you need it. One thing that I do want to talk about with the Mini though is the price. The 6th Gen iPad Mini brand new cost $500, and It's quite expensive, I won't lie, especially considering this isn't a brand new product. Though the used market for this thing is flourishing, and one quick search on eBay, I was able to find used and refurbished iPad minis for just shy of $300 or less if you're willing to wait around. And I think that when comparing that to the newer 10th gen iPad, it's an absolute steal unless all you really care about is the screen real estate. Keep in mind though that the 10th gen iPad uses the A14 Bionic and not the A15 Bionic like the Mini, which in turn could potentially mean that it's not going to last as long when it comes to software support. Anyways though, there are some other things that I do want to address with the Mini because it isn't necessarily perfect. Much like the 10th gen and the iPad Air, the Mini also has a 60Hz display, which is fine. I'm not going to sit here and act like for $500 we should be expecting ProMotion, but it would have been nice to have. The only real caveat with this display though is something that's plagued all the iPad mini 6th gen models due to how the device was built, and that's jelly scrolling. Essentially, this display is meant to be used in landscape, so the display is a 16:9 display that's been configured to be used horizontally. But when you use it in portrait and you scroll through, let's say Twitter for example, you can see that the text becomes less legible and one side lags behind the other. This is just due to how the display refreshes and, like I said, how it was built. This isn't something that you'll end up noticing in your day-to-day though, but it is worth mentioning because this and the fact that it doesn't have ProMotion are people's only real gripes, it seems like, with this model. However, personally, there's a little more that's become apparent over time, like Apple's willingness to screw over consumers and offer 64 gigs as their base model, and the fact that the battery life on this iPad isn't the best out there. I'm not sure with what the obsession is when it comes to sticking the minimum amount of storage in devices like this, but it needs to stop. What sucks though is that if you did want to upgrade it, the only option is 256 gigs, which is a huge jump from 64, and most people won't ever take advantage of that capacity. And the price difference between the two models is $150. It would have been nice to see Apple include a 128GB variant of the iPad mini, or perhaps just make that the default storage configuration. But it is what it is. Just keep in mind that if you're planning on picking one up, it's very easy to fill this thing up. Circling back to the battery though, this iPad is 2 years old and its maximum capacity is sitting at around 94%. The degradation has been minimal, which is really nice to see for something that was used pretty much every day. The problem though isn't with the battery health, it's about how long it lasts. And I think for most people, you'd get a day of light usage out of it if you pick it up here and there for a video or two and a couple of notes. But if you plan on gaming on the iPad mini or use it a lot throughout your day-to-day, I'm sorry, but it just doesn't really take the cake in the lineup. Oddly enough though, the cheaper iPad 10th gen does have fantastic battery, which seems to be on par with the 11-inch Pro. So if all you care about is the battery life and you want to sacrifice a bit of portability, I would just recommend going with the cheaper 10.9-inch iPad 10th gen. Though, in summary, I've enjoyed my time with the iPad mini, and I think that it's one of the most underrated Apple products, even at launch. I don't think the iPad mini ever got the attention that it deserved because people viewed it as just a larger iPhone. But it's an amazing companion for someone on the go looking to keep up with their busy life. Anyways, I'll see you all in the next one. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you didn't, that's cool. I'll see you all in the next one.